One of the things that keeps coming up that people want to talk to me about on a regular basis is the Rugby World Cup. Not the one that's happening for the women in just a couple of months, not the one that's happening for the men in just a couple of years, but the one that's coming around in 6 years, which is going to be hosted by the USA. That'll be the Men's World Cup of 2031, and then, of course, the Women's World Cup in 2033. World Rugby a few years ago came up with the decision that they wanted to plan ahead a little bit better. And I think anybody who looks at any of these major world sporting tournaments kind of likes that idea. The whole drawn-out bid process, the potential for corruption, which we've seen in a variety of places, variety of sports, variety of events, is just sort of infuriating. And we hear, especially like with the Olympics, but also with some of those other multi-sport events. World Rugby said, okay, let's map it out. Let's just say, okay, that what are we going to do for the next several years? And we're going to go in 27 and 29, Australia, 31 and 33, the United States. Great. Makes sense, right? And then that's all to say that World Rugby said, look, let's plan ahead. And I think that they're planning ahead secretly further than that. And they should be, because at some point the Rugby World Cup becomes far too big for major nations. 2011, New Zealand hosted the Men's World Cup, and a few years later they hosted the women. And the women's still a smaller tournament, so it could still be done. But 2011 was said to be the last time New Zealand would host the Men's World Cup. And it's because the country's too small, the infrastructure's too small, the number of hotels, the number of venues, all those things, it's just not enough, especially with this tournament expanding to 24 teams. Australia can do it. Bit stressed, but we're going to see how they do it. Pretty sure they can do it. I think France has done a great job. The two times they've hosted in 2007 and then 2023. So yes, they can host it. And why can France host it? Is because France is essentially square. Slightly taller than it is wide, but it's essentially square, well connected with airports, roads, and the TGV, the high velocity train. And then they have towns all throughout that square that can host, that are big enough, have venues that are big enough to host Rugby World Cup. Tellingly, and I think I mentioned this before, I think 2007 they had about 13 venues. And 2023 they went to 9. And I think that is something that you'll see sort of a trend there, is that Rugby World Cup is going to be moving toward a larger venues, things like that. So anyway, all of this is to say that people talk to me about the USA hosting and say, what's going on? Are these people asleep at the wheel? We've heard nothing. Are they doing nothing? Are they just standing around hoping that something's going to happen? Are they going to do a terrible job and American rugby is going to look stupid? And is USA Rugby going to lose a ton of money? And it's fair to ask that, because American rugby can, on a time, look pretty stupid. And as far as hosting massive tournaments, 2018 Sevens World Cup was a sellout, a huge success. Lots of people came. And USA Rugby managed to lose money on it. Why? Because they had a bad concessions deal and they had a bad hotel deal. And that bad hotel deal was because of timing of announcing when they would host it before they'd secured their hotel deal. That's it. Might be other factors, but that's it. Had they got a piece of the concession sales, and had they worked deals before hotels jacked up the prices for hosting all those teams, USA Rugby would have made a lot of money and they would have been a lot happier. So I have spent some time talking to people about this. Now the caveat for this is that my main sources are Alan Gilpin CEO of World Rugby, and Ross Young, former CEO of USA Rugby, who is now in charge of the commercial entity that's possibly known as Rugby World Cup USA. But I think you kind of have to rely on my ability to sniff out a little bit of BS. Maybe there is some there, fine. But I also sort of have to get an idea of what they're thinking, what they're doing, things like that. This video is brought to you by Next Phase Rugby, which is an app that allows high school rugby players to connect with college rugby programs around the country. Those programs can be school supported, club, all kinds of different ones. 450 are already on the app, and thousands of collegiate hopefuls are also on the app. Download the app if you're a college, or if you are a high school player looking for a college, go to nextphaserugby.com. There's a discount code for the premium level for high school players at the bottom of the screen. And good luck with your college search. It's also brought to you by USA Rugby Foundation, which is an organization that supports grassroots rugby around the country, and your donation can help build this great game of ours. Also brought to you by Irish Rugby Tours. Touring is a great way to expose your players to the global nature of rugby. Go to Irish Rugby Tours. They don't just do Ireland. They do all kinds of different countries: Spain, Portugal, New Zealand, South Africa, the UK. That's just a smattering of what they can do for you. Go to irishrugbytours.com. Let's talk about host venues. And I'm not going to go too far into it, but host venues. There were about 31, I believe, that expressed an initial interest in hosting Rugby World Cup events. And that was when the bid was presented to World Rugby and approved, and everyone said, yay, let's go. 30 of those were in the United States. One was in Canada. That was Vancouver. We now have, we're dropping down to closer to 20, 23, something like that. One or two have sort of said, we can't sign on the dotted line that we're still interested, but we are still interested. Just check back with us. We've got city elections coming up, or state or provincial elections coming up, things like that. So we just want to be sure before we say, yeah. But it's a 20, in the 20s. So a couple have dropped out. And probably maybe 30, 32, 33 venues that are under consideration. It's not going to be that many. It's probably going to be closer to 13, 14, 15. It's still going to be probably the most venues any Rugby World Cup has ever had. And why? Well, we know why. The number one reason, it's like patently obvious. So they're going to hold the World Cup in the time frame that they normally hold it, September, October, maybe into the first weekend of November. And I'll tell you, let's go into the reasons why first, right? So I like parentheses into parentheses. We're already down a rabbit hole. Why hold it in September, October, November? Because they hold it in September, October, November all the time. The time off for teams and the prep for teams is very important. Remember that Northern Hemisphere professional leagues are still playing, but they're kind of stressed, and they've accepted that. But what they don't want is a lot of extra time, which should be player off time, going into preparation for the World Cup. So if you think about the English Premiership or the United Rugby Championship or the French League, all of these things ending in late spring, May to June. Right after that, players are supposed to have time off. Bam, June. Get off your feet, fix what's wrong with you, whatever. That's very, very important. If you start the World Cup earlier, it's really hard for them to get that time off. It's hugely important, not only for the players, but also for the quality of the World Cup and the professional leagues, the professional teams, whose players are being asked to do this. So that's very difficult. Second reason not to move it into the summer for the United States is, in case you haven't noticed, it is summer. It's hot in the United States in the summer. Not everywhere. Some places are very pleasant. Excuse me. They're present as well. But heck, if they could host the whole thing in like Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, the weather would be fantastic. Although I think it was at the Club Soccer World Championships, it was raining. So rain's not the end of the world. A little bit of thunder and lightning, that's rare. But usually in the summer it's great. Anyway, but you kind of say, well, you can't have places like Texas, Louisiana, Florida, even Southern California, even the breadbasket, Kansas City, something like that, St. Louis. These very, very difficult places to say, yes, we're going to hold World Cup stuff here. You could only do it, probably only do it at night. It limits your options, things like that. Just, again, complications upon complications. So bump, bump, bump. Back we go, September, October, beginning of November. Fine. Well, what's the problem there? In America, football, namely the NFL, college football as well. The biggest stadiums available are college football stadiums. However, they are in remote-ish areas, and I think that they are less likely to be on the slate for venues for the Rugby World Cup, simply because A, they're huge. You could say, all right, look. New Zealand plays England in a pool match, and you say that's going to be huge. Can you get 100,000 people to Ann Arbor, Michigan? No, it's just no. So that's the understanding there. Well, yes, baseball, but there's a complication with baseball. I love rugby games in baseball stadiums. I think that the extra space that the baseball stadium usually provides is pretty cool. The unique configuration of the stands in a baseball stadium make it more fun. Certainly, baseball stadiums lend themselves terrifically well to sevens tournaments because you can, as happened in AT&T Stadium in San Francisco, everyone sort of hung out at center field, having a beverage or two while watching the games out there, which sort of cut across laterally the outfield and the infield. And that little crescent area of deep center field was where people were warming up. So you could see both of them at the same time. It's really great. But I think baseball teams are going to have a tough time worrying about lines on the field getting chewed up with multiple rugby games on there, having to get rid of the pitcher's mound and then replace it. It's a big job to do that. And going into October, we don't even know who's going to be vacant and who's not. So you can't plan that until, at the end of September, first week of October is when you know who's playing or not. I suppose you could get at the All-Star break and say, okay, we've got an opening for one more baseball stadium. Who's in last place? It's a bit silly. So ultimately we come to football stadiums, probably NFL stadiums, plus some high-end Major League Soccer stadiums or multi-use stadiums, plus the odd outlier stadium that might happen. What they're going through right now, Ross Young, people working with him, have been going across the country examining venues. Not only examining venues, though, what they're also doing is meeting with and talking to the people who are in charge of the venues. It's not always the same kind of people. Sometimes it's a football team. Sometimes it's a convention and visitors bureau or a sporting entity, or it might be the city itself. Sometimes, I think it's Baltimore, where the Ravens are essentially tenants in their own stadium. They don't have control over who plays, what happens in there. Yet they have input. They can say, hey, could you please not put a country music concert on in the or a tractor pull the day before a football game? Of course they wouldn't do that. But it's someone else. It's not necessarily the people playing the sport that are in control of the stadium. How do they decide whether they want the Rugby World Cup in that place. It might be some places they sit there and go, this is great. We actually don't have a lot of football going on here or a lot of sport. This time, we're going to fill it. We're going to make a lot of money with visitors and things like that. This is where they say, yeah, this is an option we want. We're going to be available for multiple pool games all the way through. We'll be happy to do it. We'll even make, something like that. We'll maybe make a tenant move for a bit or something like that. Okay. They're going around and finding out not only then which venues work, but which controlling entities are interested. If they're not interested, waste of time. Okay. Finding the venues. Well, I think you heard that everybody's thinking big. They're not thinking about 10,000 seat stadiums. There's no point. It remains true. I found out another surprising piece of information, but that is true. That per game, Rugby World Cup outdraws the FIFA World Cup. That's a surprise to me. But when I thought about it, I thought, actually, that does seem to work. There is a reason for that. What we did know, and we knew when the bid came through, that the number one attended FIFA World Cup in total fans and fans per event was United States 1994. Nobody's eclipsed that since. Why? Everybody wants to visit the United States. It's a really fun place to visit. Lots of different places, very, very different. So if you want to go to New York, you want to go to New Orleans, you want to go to Miami, you want to go to San Francisco, you want to go to San Diego, you want to go to Memphis or Nashville, or Chicago, right? You're going to very, very different places with different cultures, different food, different vibe, really interesting no matter what. So that's one of the reasons why people want to visit the United States. It's also very easy to get around, an unmatched highway system and airport system. Really, probably the only country that I can think of easier to get around is probably Germany. Or as easy to get around as Germany. So they're going to go big on venues. 60,000, 70,000, maybe 80,000. United States has a lot of those. They also have a pretty good amount of 20 to 30,000 seat stadiums, usually soccer stadiums. What the USA doesn't have a lot of is that 35, 40 to 55 seat stadiums. Just don't have a lot of them. If you look at different states, World Stadiums is a great website that talks about that. And click on any state and you'll see they'll list the stadiums and it'll be like 10,000, 12,000, 17,000, or 65,000. That's how it operates. Okay, so they'll probably be searching for a couple of the nice little Goldilocks stadiums for a little bit of use, but for the most part they're going to go big. Then they have to sit down and say, how do we fit the Rugby World Cup into the existing schedule? Again, this is something you wouldn't know. You wouldn't necessarily assume it's happened. Rugby World Cup USA has met with the NFL, and the NFL has come back and said, we'd like to work with you. They're perfectly happy to work with them, saying, look, you need us to schedule an away game, a bye week, an away game or something like that for a team. We can do that as long as we know early enough by a certain date. You come to us and say, this is where we need that. They're going to work with Rugby World Cup. And then remember, Rugby World Cup is not just playing on Sunday like the NFL. Well, the NFL plays almost every day of the week now, right? But they are always splintering the games through the week. One of the big lessons from the 99 World Cup, in fact, was that just playing on the weekends destroyed momentum for teams, for the tournament, because you'd say, oh, great, yeah, did you see that game on Saturday? You see that game on Sunday? Okay, great. And then no games. There were like 8 games on one day and on the other. They're looking for like a maximum of 4 games in a day. And probably, they might do 2 in a venue. I don't know, they might do 3. That's hard, but they probably could do it. But spreading it out, but also leveraging when a venue is available.
And this video is also brought to you by Panther Rugby Academy, providing elite playing and training opportunities for players throughout the South and a more extended version of the South. Panther Rugby Academy, check them out. And I also want to thank a new kit provider, which is 8x8 Sports. You can't see their logo on this shirt, although you can see it on others, but there's the back of the same shirt because I have more than one. And several other great kit. We'll be having merchandise available very soon as well, so I'm excited about that. Thanks to 8x8 Sports. It's 8x8sports.com.
There are metrics that organizations, venue controlling entities use sometimes to say, all right, is it planned to bring in this amount of money in the economic impact? What do we have to do? How much time do we have to spend on this? What do we have to do to change the venue, clean up the commercial side of it? Things like that. They go through, bam, 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 hit those metrics. If you hit enough of those metrics, they say, yes, we want you. And if you miss them, they go, no, never mind, thank you very much. Great. I mean, I think that's almost easy, right? You just say, oh, yes, we do it or we don't. On the same side of it, World Rugby is dealing with that as well. As you know, rugby fields are bigger than football fields, significantly so. Rugby fields are actually bigger than soccer fields. Technically, they're supposed to be longer. Technically, if you look at a soccer field, that dead ball line, that's the goal line for a rugby field. So you'd want the in goal, the end zone, going past the dead ball line. Very often we don't do that. Very often we pop that inside the field of play for soccer because of how much space is available. Now, World Rugby has dialed back their insistence on mandated size for the field. What they instead are saying is there's a certain percentage we'll take of, say, maybe a little bit narrower, or maybe a little bit shorter, or maybe the buffer zones around the edge are going to be a little bit smaller. Not all of those. If you're like narrower, shorter, and not enough buffer zone around the edge, and it's a concrete wall that you're smashing into, they will say, no, that's not good enough. But if you're compromising on one or two of those a little bit, that's fine. So now we've cut down to about 30, 33, whatever venues. Maybe one or two come in late. Remember, some's still to be built, right? It's 6 years from now. Some of them, a city is saying, yes, but not that stadium. We're going to go with, we're building a new one. Or they could also be saying, yes, that stadium, that's going to be not used by the time we roll around to the World Cup because we're building a new stadium for the football team in town. This stadium's still perfectly good. Go ahead and use it all you want. Those things happen. And finally, I think we've got some key stadiums. You sit there and, like, there are some stadiums that just aren't available for a lot, but they'll be made available at a certain time. And you can say, well, this is perfect for the semifinals. They may not host any pool games. They'll host the semifinals. And those plans already be made too. So I've got a lot to say about money. I've got a lot to say about locations, and also sort of how it all comes together. And we'll talk about that in another episode. I just wanted to start with perhaps a little bit of reassurance to the American rugby fan that people are actually doing something. They visited cities, they visited venues, they've made plans about that. They have their metrics down. They have commitments to stay in the discussion. Eventually there'll be commitments to say, yeah, we're the host nation. The host city or host region. It's the host regions that are going to be on top of a lot of those hotel deals and things like that. All of that will be pieced into a host region. So you can say, hey, we're going to freeze hotel rates at this and things like that. But it is happening. I was drastically reassured about that. And yes, I mean, I think you have a lot of questions. I still have more questions. I have some more answers as well. But we're going to end with that. It's happening. And it's going to happen in 2031. They're building toward 2033 as well. They're planning that at the same time. And we'll talk about it more later. So thanks a lot.